Hi everyone, welcome to week 10. And this week, as you can see on the title of this lecture, we're going to be talking about something called the balanced scorecard. And in fact, we're going to talk about this for the next couple of weeks. So let me get right into that and talk about why we're discussing that this week. All right, so first of all, let's once again talk about where we're at in the course this semester. And I want to remind you of some of the things we've been talking about. So we have talked about John Bryson's 10-step model, which is in our textbook. And that's a very important text. As a matter of fact, Bryson's text is used a lot. But as you know, I've exposed you to some other ways of looking at strategic planning, because Bryson is not the only way of looking at strategic planning. So, for example, we just got done talking about Mark Moore's strategic triangle. And in fact, there's one more paper coming up concerning Moore's strategic triangle. I let you look at some of the videos by Jen Lockman and her consulting firm and what she thinks about strategic planning. And this week I have one more author to present to you. Actually, a couple of authors, Robert Kaplan and David Norton. And they came up with this idea of the balanced scorecard. So for the next couple of weeks, we're going to look at what Kaplan and Norton had to say about this thing they call the balanced scorecard and what it purports to do for an organization. And then we'll get a chance in the two discussions this week and next week, weeks 10 and 11, to experiment with the balanced scorecard. And I think you recall when you look at the syllabus that coming up with a balanced scorecard for an organization was one of the options I gave you. I think one or two students took me up on that. And I just want to let you know that this balanced scorecard approach is something that you probably will run into in both for-profit companies and nonprofit organizations because it's a very useful tool. So let's get right into that. But before we do that, I just want to put out a couple of reminders, and that is that we have 3 more written assignments left. So due October 29th is the short analysis paper number 2, which is a strategic triangle analysis. And you should have a lot of practice in that because we did it for a couple of weeks in the discussion board. I do want to let you know, I want you to expand on that effort that we exerted for the discussion boards concerning the strategic triangle. And I've given you all one nonprofit to write on. So that's due October 29th. And then there's 2 more important items due for your term project. First, on November 19th is an outline. And actually, I'll just tell you, students have asked me before, why do I make you do an outline? I make you do an outline to help you write your final term project paper, which is due December 14th. The effort of doing an outline helps you organize your thoughts and helps you construct a more useful paper concerning your organization that you've selected. So for that November 19th assignment, I've given you a lot of resources from the Purdue OWL and other sources on how to construct an outline. And then, of course, the final paper is due December 14th. So you probably want to look ahead on the assignments tab and look at the resources I've given you and make sure you're moving along and making good progress on your term project. And really, by this time, I think a lot of you have finished your interviews. If you haven't, please do finish those by October 31st. That will give you time to construct your outline and, of course, your paper. And then we have about 5 more discussions left, including this week. So we are really nearing the end of the semester. Okay, so I gave you a series of readings, and I want you to look at those readings for this week 10. effort. And here, when you get into the readings, you'll see this. This is what this thing called the balanced scorecard looks like. And what it is all about is an organization having a vision and having a strategy. So the balanced scorecard is not necessarily about creating the vision and the strategy. The balanced scorecard actually helps you understand how you can translate this vision and strategy into 4 perspectives. So what do we mean by perspectives? What do Kaplan and Norton mean by perspectives? Well, perspective is just your way of looking at something. So the old story about blind people, for example, describing an elephant. It depends on where you have your hands on the elephant. Or even if you are an artist, if you construct a piece of art, a painting, for example, if you're looking at a landscape, that landscape is going to be different depending on your perspective. So depending on your point of view. So Kaplan and Norton said that for any organization, there are at least 4 perspectives from which different people look at the organization and look at the strategy of the organization. They said there was a financial perspective. They said there was an internal business perspective. They said there was a learning and growth perspective, and they said there was a customer perspective. So think about that, for example. The easiest way to think about this would be a for-profit company. So let's say you have a bicycle shop, and your strategy is to, let's just give you a real simple strategy. Your strategy is to make more money this year than you did last year by selling your bicycles and repairing bicycles for people. So your customers have one way of looking at your business, and they might look at your business based on the price of your bikes, how much you charge for a bicycle tune-up, for example. They might also look at your friendliness, your customer service. Do you have a website? Are you prompt with your service? Your learning and growth perspective refers to your employees and you yourself. So, for example, how does the way you train your bicycle technicians and your salespeople support the vision? And then you might have an internal business process perspective. So this would be all about how you run your business. What are the hours you think you should open your shop? What are the days you think you should open your shop? How much should you pay your employees? How much should you train your employees? How about should you offer your employees the chance to get health insurance? All these kinds of internal processes in your organization support your vision and strategy. And then finally, your financial perspective. So if you're a for-profit business, you know that if you lose money month on month, pretty soon you're going to be out of business. So you have to have a way of organizing your finances to understand how those support the strategy. So Kaplan and Norton say that all 4 of these perspectives allow you to start setting objectives, measures, targets, and initiatives. So you can't really see these very well, but for each perspective, what they say is, you can set objectives, you can measure those objectives, and you can give yourself targets. So again, let me just reiterate the 4 perspectives. So financial, the goal is to succeed financially. And he talks about shareholders. It's not always shareholders. It could be your board of directors, for example. And then the internal business perspective for a for-profit company is to satisfy shareholders and customers, and talking about business processes. The learning and growth perspective is to achieve your vision and sustain your ability to change and improve. And then finally, the customer perspective is to achieve your vision, or how should we appear to our customers. So all 4 of these perspectives support the strategy. So the balanced scorecard really is a strategic management system in that it enables the organization to set, track, and achieve its business strategies. So it was developed to overcome some inherent weaknesses of simply using financial measures. So probably a lot of you know that that's the way a lot of organizations, companies look at themselves. They simply look at their finances. Am I making a profit or am I losing money? Well, that's great, but if that's all you look at, you kind of forget about the other measures that are important, and that's why they developed this. So now, what's this have to do with us? Well, typically this was first developed for the for-profit sector. In fact, Kaplan and Norton are at the Harvard Business School, and they developed it for for-profit businesses, but it has migrated to nonprofits. And so, again, it's based on this idea of setting up objectives, measures, and targets and initiatives across these four perspectives. And they are all designed, I don't want to belabor this point because we talked about each of these four perspectives, but they're all designed right here where I'm circling. They're all designed for the organization to achieve its value proposition, which is, what is it that we do that is of value? So this is interesting because this takes us back a little bit to what Moore had to say about the strategic triangle, that we're creating public value. And so this is another way of thinking about how we create this idea of public value. So let me just take a second, because I said that this started in the for-profit sector, but it has also migrated to the nonprofit sector. So let's compare and contrast these perspectives. So first of all, at the top you see I have the financial perspective. So what is this in the for-profit sector? Well, simply put, it's profit maximization, or perhaps in the nonprofit, financial health. So what are some measures that we use to measure the financial perspective? So in the nonprofit sector, we could look at donations, expenditures, operating to expense ratios, and mission to overhead ratios. And so actually what's interesting about this, if you can go to organizations that actually measure the effectiveness of nonprofits, and they will look at things like this. So Nonprofit Navigator is a good site, and they will look at things like how much of your donation goes to the actual mission versus how much goes to fundraising, for example. Okay, the customer or client perspective, right here. This is the organization's performance with targeted customers and market segments. So, in a for-profit business, we might look at market share, customer retention, new customer acquisition, customer profitability. Well, a lot of nonprofits might look at the same thing. Again, we used a particular museum in Omaha as one of our case studies, as you recall. Well, I can tell you that that museum does look at customer retention. It looks at memberships. It looks at new visits. So those are some of the perspectives that a nonprofit might be looking at. How about learning and growth? Well, this talks about how well are people and systems performing within the organization. So here we might measure things like employee motivation, retention, training, skills alignment. And then finally, internal business perspective. So this is your operating performance. That is how well the organization does with the resources it possesses. And so here we might be looking at things like cost and quality, cycle times, new products, innovation. Even in a nonprofit, we're still looking at the training of our employees. The cost of the products we're putting out, the cost of the services we're doing. For example, our food bank example, we might be looking at the cost per meal that we provide. And we're constantly striving to improve that. So this balanced scorecard can apply to just about any sector. And so we talked about this. Again, what we're doing is we're translating vision and strategy into four perspectives. So the major point that I'm making here is that yes, you need to have a strategy. What this does is it helps you to affect that strategy in practical ways. So this is all leading up to this week's discussion board. Before I do that, I want to remind you what I've given you some things to read, and I've also given you a couple of YouTube videos I want you to look at featuring Kaplan and Norton's Balanced Scorecard and what they have to say about it for the for-profit business and what they have to say about it for nonprofits. So please do look at those videos. They're very short, but very useful. So in the discussion board this week, I'm going to ask you these 4 questions. What are the perspectives? How are they deployed in an organization? And then I want you to think about what would they look like in a typical nonprofit versus a for-profit? What kinds of things would you look at? And then I want you to discuss whether you think this is a valid way to look at an organization. And then next week, I have an additional Kaplan article for you, which talks more about the balanced scorecard for strategic planning. And then, as I've been doing with the class, I'm going to give you a chance next week to use this balanced scorecard approach for your own term project organization. So that's it for this week. Please do let me know your concerns and questions about the balanced scorecard. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing your discussions this week. Thank you.